Welcome back to another episode of Growth Vertical, everyone. Today we have a special guest, Aditya Varanasi, founder and CEO of Awarity, a digital marketing solution for up and coming companies. Aditya has actually had an amazing entrepreneurial journey so far. He's worked at some big businesses, right? And he's always had that input from the entrepreneur side, and been in the position where he's been in a give or take situation, as he likes to put it, with corporate America, uh, in particular. So we're going to be talking a bit about that today. But before that, I mean, you've Aditya's had quite the journey, being a chemical engineer before, and then spent quite a few years, I think over a decade, right,
hmm
at PepsiCo, and it was led to actually him being in this digital media world, and his portfolio is stacked with names like Cheetos, Cracker Jack, and Lay's Stacks. So today we're going to be talking about cracking the code to world class but cost effective marketing for startups. So for those of you out there who want to know exactly how you can beat giants at the game of marketing and what actual real marketing is, we're going to be talking a bit about that today. But Aditya, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here on this episode. Before we get into like the weeds of everything, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how it all started? Like, where did it all begin with you and Awarity?
Yeah, no, first off, thank you so much for having me on today. And yeah, my journey is atypical. It's long and winding, and it's really just more than anything a journey of self-discovery, trying to figure out what I really love doing in the world. And I'm fortunate. It took me a few twists and turns, but I've landed on something that I wake up every morning and I love that I have the opportunity to go do it. But it started, I think coming out of college, I just wanted a good paying job. And I studied chemical engineering, and I heard they paid well. I had no other insight onto chemical engineering other than the fact I knew they paid well and there was demand for jobs. And so started working there, and I ended up at Frito-Lay. And what drew me to Frito-Lay was the fact that they were an industry leader. And I thought, hey, this is a place I can learn from, because you could see when you're at an industry leader, everybody there is striving for a level of excellence to stay better than every competitor out there. And I thought, wow, I could really learn in this environment. And that's what drew me to Frito-Lay. It was there that I first got exposed to marketing. I never thought about a career in marketing. I never thought about marketing as a job function. Didn't know anything about it, just didn't have any exposure to it in my upbringing. And I started to spend time with the brand marketing teams at Frito-Lay, PepsiCo, learning about how consumers interact with new products I was working on. I was in the R&D group. I was developing new products. So I'd get to attend focus groups, see consumers interacting, hear their feedback. And I found myself really excited for those days where I got to work with the marketing team, because I could see it was at the intersection of consumer strategy, business strategy, competitive strategy, financial considerations, market share, optimizing design, creative. Like it brought all these pieces together that it felt like there was always something new to learn and figure out. And that's what ultimately drew me to the marketing function. And so I went and got my MBA at Northwestern, came back to Frito-Lay in the brand marketing group, and as you mentioned, worked on some really fun brands. And there were kind of two big lessons that stood out to me during that time that have informed where I am now. The first is when I was on the Cheetos brand, we ran this really complex marketing regression on our full mix. So everything that we did as a brand, whether it was brand marketing or sales, we put into a model. So it included things like pricing, TV exposure, competitive activity, launch of new product, retail merchandising. Everything at every large retailer was logged down to the week, and then we ran a regression model on it to say what kind of input did all of these factors have ultimately on the brand's growth that year. And it sounds really smart. And I think my engineering background led me to become really curious about it, and seeing if I could recreate components of that. And I saw an anomaly. And because at the end of the day, everybody's getting these results as, oh, TV is this efficient, pricing is this efficient, merchandising is this efficient. But the truth is, when you take a step back, that's not how consumers buy. It's never in isolation. And so I had them rerun the model looking at interaction of variables, looking at what happens if you have, say, TV with in-store merchandising that's in a high traffic area. with pricing at the same time. And what we saw is the lift we experienced was much higher than each of those channels independently. And it makes a lot of sense. If you take a step back, you're a consumer, you're watching TV, you see a Cheetos commercial, it shows you it's messy, it's orange, it makes you feel like a kid when you eat it. These aren't the literal thoughts that you have, but it's the emotional sentiment that you feel when you see the commercial, because everybody knows what Cheetos are. So brand awareness for Cheetos looks a little bit different than a brand awareness for a startup. But you're reminding them why Cheetos is unique in the world of snacking. Because when you have a snack, you're just looking for a momentary reward. And this is a unique reward when you contrast it with every other snack, ice cream, crackers, to fruits and vegetables, to Lay's potato chips. Cheetos delivers a unique emotional experience during that we don't consciously think of. But you see it and you're like, okay, oh yeah, Cheetos. I was thinking about that. I love how I feel when I have Cheetos. It's a nice snack, nice little treat to have in the middle of the afternoon. Then you go to the store and it's in a high traffic area. Like, oh yeah, I was just thinking of Cheetos. Oh, look, it's on sale, 50 cents off. I'm going to grab a bag. And that's how every purchase decision is made. It's a multitude of touch points that ultimately persuade people to decide if a product can bring value to their life or not in some shape or form. And so that was really informative for me, is that even with a high awareness brand like Cheetos, you still need that ongoing awareness to retain mind share and showcase your value to customers. And that is a key component ultimately, even with down funnel activity. The second thing was, during that time period, consumer media consumption was changing dramatically. We're shifting away from print newspapers to visiting websites. We're shifting from traditional cable to streaming. We're shifting from searching in the yellow pages to using Google, Yelp, and every other search function. And the business model for delivering that new advertising was largely the same as the one that delivered the old kind of advertising. And I thought, hey, there's got to be a different way to handle this. If this is tech enabled, why can't we use technology a little bit differently? And we experimented with some things on brands I was on. We had a lot of success. Fast forward, I left PepsiCo. I was hired by a private equity firm to run a startup. And I said, hey, let me run this same PepsiCo playbook. Let's have some things at the top of the funnel on brand building. We'll be hyper targeted so we can be more efficient, because we're a startup. We shouldn't be spending millions and millions of dollars a month on advertising. But let's scale it and let's do some things at the top. Let's do some things in the middle of the funnel. Let's focus on converting people when they get to the site at the bottom of the funnel. And what I found is that was really hard. Without the resources of a PepsiCo behind me, it was really hard to find the talent. It was hard to find the solutions. It was hard to find something that was price effective. And I thought there's a real problem here, because a real comprehensive advertising strategy can only be enacted by large brands right now. So I parted ways with that group and ultimately started Awarity. And I saw the biggest opportunity was that top of funnel advertising, where you're reaching the masses, but still being very targeted. And by being very targeted, you can be more efficient. And by being more efficient, ultimately becomes more affordable. And I thought, if you're a local restaurant and you used to rely on newspapers, yellow pages, local print to get the word out, you don't have, now they're pouring all their money into social and search, but those channels have limited reach. It's less than half of social media users are on the platform daily, believe it or not. And so if you're relying on social media alone to build awareness, you're going to be inherently limited. So I used programmatic advertising. We developed our own automation, our own optimization to extract more value out of it. Because, $300 a month for a small business could be 50% of their monthly marketing budget. Whereas at PepsiCo, that's sofa change that people may never find. So we had to make sure that $300 worked really hard for this local restaurant. And that forced us to reimagine the way media is purchased here and to find more efficiency and higher effectiveness. And fast forward, and here we are several years later. We were named to the Inc. 5000 last year as one of the fastest growing companies in America. We expect to be on that again this year, and probably for the next few years, to be honest. And we're finding that this automation has nearly unlimited usage. Enterprise brands are finding, hey, if we can tie advertising to product availability, we can API that data and activate and deactivate certain zip codes based on retail availability and make the advertising more efficient. You could take a franchise business that maybe they used to buy all of the DMA, but they only have 10 units in that DMA. And now with our automation, we can set up 10 micro campaigns uniquely around each location with unique targeting, unique creative, unique reporting, and corporate can still roll it up and see what they're getting in aggregate. And so we're starting to scratch the surface on the use cases that we develop for small business. And, our goal is just to help brands level the playing field when they're competing against much larger competitors.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and there's so many points that you mentioned that I really want to explore. And one of the first ones that you mentioned was obviously the fact that you were a chemical engineer, right? And there's something in that, right? Because as you mentioned, the approach to the way you were learning, but then also applying, let's say, even some transferable skills that you knew subconsciously, you can sort of apply that to the nature of testing, right, with your frameworks. I know similarly how that feels as a growth marketer, right, or a marketer that just focuses on growth, which is basically a fancy way of the approach that we use for marketing, right? I did computer science, right? So as a bachelor's, so I thought, okay, I was supposed to be a technical consultant. Did that for a couple of years, and then I was like, I'm leaving, and then went into marketing, right? And it was specifically tech marketing, and I totally, even to this day, I still have more and more realizations, even though I know it already, as stupid as that sounds, that approach of marketing, like you mentioned, where people, well, we're not focused on the actual experience overall, right? On the actual feeling that every buyer's going through, that all those emotions that are going through before they make the final purchase. It's consistent across anything that you market, right?
Mm-hmm.
B2B startups, B2C
Yep.
startups, large enterprises, and it's the fundamental, I think, right? It's the fundamentals you mentioned, which is pretty interesting. I think, when you made that switch from enterprise to go into Awarity, how was that for you, right? Because that in itself might have something like a lead into how you actually market, obviously, for your clients. But as the founder, you might have had to adjust, right? Because you were used to dealing with the large budgets
Yeah.
right out the gate, and then you moved to the small budgets. Was that mindset shift difficult, or was it something
Yeah.
that, yeah,
So I had that period in between where I was with the private equity startup, and I worked for a guy named Monish Pabrai, and I learned a lot about entrepreneurship from him. And I would say a lot of that adjustment came in that time period where I was trying to adapt what I'd learned there, but recognizing the environment is completely different. The brand maturity is low, the brand awareness is low, our product market fit wasn't completely proven. There was a host of things, and it was quite a jarring adaptation. I thought the best way to solve it is through marketing, because even if we're bringing people to the site and they're not converting, we can get learning out of that. We can figure out what's working, what's not working, and figure out how to iterate and measure impact, at least through website engagement. And that, to your point, is the combination of thinking a little bit like an engineer, but also, being fortunate to have some of the experience as a marketer. And I think coming out of that experience, it informed a lot. It was almost like that leg up, having now made a little bit of that transition there. When I started at Awarity, really the focus was boots on the ground, elbow grease. We did, our first batch of customers came from my personal network, people that I'd reached out to primarily locally, or through connections from people I knew locally. Then we became a member of the local Chamber of Commerce, and we're fortunate to get some business there, and slowly started to expand kind of our networking outreach to get businesses. But we treated every sales meeting as a focus group. And what did we hear? What did we not hear? What were emotionally they looking for? And that we just kept iterating and iterating our product and our product experience and our marketing messages, to the point that, fortunately, by the time 2020 hit and networking went away, we were ready to make the transition to using digital tools to acquire customers because we had harvested a few years of insight on who that customer really is and how they think about making their marketing decisions and what are the key components in driving those decisions, what matters to them as they're going through that process. And so then we had the foundation and we're able to build on that. That's candidly the playbook I suggest to a lot of people. Try what you can with your network. Talk to friendly people, talk to people you know. And really the value isn't just the sales. Obviously that's critical. You need sales, you need revenue. The real value is what you learn and being able to apply what you learn as you get to the point where you want to start scaling.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty interesting, and I guess that brings me to think about what marketing is now, right? You mentioned that if you're able to get there cost efficiently, like you do with Awarity, and take the framework approach, right, into really thinking about how you can become more hyper targeted and not waste a dollar outside of the circle that you need to target. Can you paint a picture of what world-class marketing looks like now that technology is involved? I'm guessing that definition has changed, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
in the past with those enterprises, we're talking about constant commercials. Maybe the team's focused on the image. We see, not sure how familiar you are with the UK space, even with certain retailers and stuff. But now people are launching, like so many superstores are launching Christmas ads, right? Like John Lewis and Sainsbury's, and that's over here. And then you look at the US, right? You probably got Target, Walmart, and everyone trying to get everyone into their stores during Christmas, but by appealing to emotion, using technology to sort of ensure that they increase the efficiency of the output. So the giants are using those tactics too with the tech, right?
Yes.
They're just able to throw a little bit more money at the
Yes.
creativity side of it. Whereas we can do that too now because that technology is out of dispense. So yeah, going back to that question, do you think the meaning of world-class marketing has changed?
No, I don't think so. I think the tech enables it to a larger audience. And to me, the definition transcends a couple of things. One is, and marketing, truly is the four P's. When you think about the word marketing: price, product, placement, promotion. I'm going to focus a little more on the promotion side, the advertising side for the purpose of this, so we don't dive into get too broad. But when it comes to world-class marketing, world-class advertising, first thing comes down to, is there a cohesive customer experience? And that means what you're saying in the first ad they see is in congruence to the experience they have when they call customer service and expect and have a problem.
Yeah.
Is there congruence in that theme across awareness advertising, engagement advertising, conversion advertising, your website, your email marketing, your SEO, your SEM copy? All of it should be in congruence. Then if they become a customer, every touch point after that also needs to be in congruence. And by that, doesn't mean you're saying the same thing, but the tone, sentiment, and value proposition needs to have that thread of consistency throughout. And I think that's the first piece that's really important. That's something you can control. You don't have to have a huge budget to do that. You just have to have discipline to do that. And you have to have insight, and you have to be willing to adapt what that is as you're learning from your customers what really matters to them. That's never a static equation. That's going to always evolve. And early on, it's going to evolve more quickly. We used to make changes to our website in the early days weekly.
Yeah.
Now, we're making our first major change to the website now that we've made in years, just because it's just been honed to a point where we felt like it was in good shape. So that's the first is that. The second is knowing who your target customer is and being very, very clear on who that bullseye customer is. It's easy to say, and look, I could say this at Awarity, we can serve almost any business, but we've identified where does our product have the greatest differential in terms of impact it can have on customers, and where do we have the greatest likelihood to succeed just based on our own inherent intrinsic strengths, whether it's relationships our sales team has or experience we have in the past. And that's the must-win area. It doesn't mean we can't serve a lot of other people, but if even large brands, and I can tell you this from having worked on large brands, they pick a bullseye. They know it's got a halo, but they're very clear on who that bullseye customer is. And everything they do, when you talk about that creative being in congruence, that experience being in congruence, is tailored for that bullseye customer. Then, when you know the customer and you know what kind of message and value proposition you want to articulate, the last part is then deploying media that most efficiently reaches them. And some of that's a function of budget, and some of that's a function of what you have bandwidth to handle, but being very, very targeted and purposeful on that. So take your idea of let's say you have a brand that launched in Target. And that's maybe not the right example, but let's say it's likely that it's regional. And then even if you go from there, you can likely identify your must-win areas where you have the highest incidence of your target customer or the highest likelihood to win. For example, if you're a more expensive premium product, you may want to focus on your higher income zip codes as an example.
Yeah.
If you are, if you're a product that tailors for a specific demographic, you want to look at where they're located and where they're shopping and how do you win with them and how do you target them with advertising. So if you get very focused on that, you can then take, instead of having to win this nationwide battle, you could say, I've got 50 must-win zip codes that are going to help me get my business to the next stage. Don't try to boil the ocean and compete head-to-head with the national brands. Win in those pockets. You win one pocket, you can then win the next pocket, then you can win the next pocket and slowly build towards something bigger. But the two-sided benefit of that is not only are you being more efficient and focused on something you can influence, the learnings you get on that smaller pocket, you can then adapt onto the next pocket. And the learnings you get there, you can adapt onto the next pocket. So that's to me the definition of world-class marketing. It's congruence of product experience from creative to every touch point you have. It's being laser focused on who that target customer is. That could be demographic, it could be psychographic, it could be behavioral. It's just, who are they? And the narrower that is, the better. And then the third is deploy media that's most likely to reach them and engage them on their journey to purchase.
Yeah. Those latter two variables actually bring me to the idea of setting up the customer journey, right? So
Yeah.
you've mentioned how to create the entire experience, of course. Now, if we're going to pick certain businesses to talk about, I guess we could just say, for example, a software business, right? That's selling software to enterprises. Let's say it's in the supply chain, right? For example, right? It's the same thing. Usually, when I go into whether we're working on any project or whether I'm working individually on a project, whatever it is, it's best, I always say, to go bottom up of the funnel, right? So you
Yeah.
look at because you're capturing demand initially at the bottom of the funnel that already exists in the market. And if you're a trailblazer in the market, then you work your way from the bottom up to the top, right? So because I think it's really weird, right? Humans, the way I described it to someone is humans can come up with the idea on their own without knowing that there's already something there for it. It's just that one day they might think of, oh, I'm having a bit of trouble doing this, or I'm feeling hungry, but I kind of crave this, but a bit of this at the same time. They'll merge the two, and then guess next thing you know, there's some confectionery stand with that particular product you want to eat, or there's a particular software out there, right?
Yeah.
For the supply chain to make me more efficient in packing my shipments or something like that. So what's interesting is I feel people are now, especially startups, are scared to go to the top of funnel side, right?
Yes.
And you've probably seen this as well because
Yeah.
of the budget, right? And so how do you think to create that sort of one-of-a-kind customer journey, how important do you think it is to then start branching out? Because that's something I say, start bottom of the funnel, then work your way up to the top, because that way you're using your dollars more effectively. And you're saturating parts of the funnel that you know will work with the dollars that you got right now, higher ROI. But yeah, how do you create that one of a kind journey then? Do you also suggest the same, or is there something else you
Absolutely.
guys
I
say?
could not be in greater agreement. We will have customer calls where somebody will inquire through our website, and they, for budgetary reasons or the phase of their business, we tell them the same thing. A lot of times we'll say, hey, it's better for you to start at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah.
Get your fundamentals, get your foundation, get to a point where you're comfortable investing in awareness. And by the time you get to that point, you would have honed the bottom of your funnel to actually benefit from that increased awareness. So no, I'm 100% on board with that, that's something we turn away business for that reason if we don't think it's the right thing for them, because our goal is to help the long-term success of a business. And if they have issues at the bottom of the funnel, top of funnel is not going to solve it. And it's, if anything, going to create a distraction and more problems for them that might impact their ability to succeed. So
Yeah.
we agree bottom up. What we find is it's generally businesses that have some kind of a mature sales and marketing process can benefit from top of funnel. Some kind of proven product. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. So our rule of thumb is, and this is very generic because it can't be applied to everybody, there's always exceptions, it's generally somewhere over $1 million a year in revenue. If you're looking at a $300 a month advertising expense and saying that's a no-brainer, then it's probably right for you. If you're looking at it saying, ooh, I don't know if I can do that for more than 2 months, it's probably not right for you. And that's where I take pride. We're able to deliver that top of funnel just more affordably and more efficiently than anything else out there, so businesses can try it and you could be targeted. We have businesses that come to say, hey, we operate nationwide, but we want to spend $1,000. And what we'll help them do is say, hey, why don't we hone in on these specific key markets? Let's hone in on these specific customers. Let's try to saturate to what you were talking about, a very narrow focused area at the top of the funnel versus trying to blanket and spread it too thin everywhere. And you'll see better results that way. And if they're ready to do that, then we think it's a good fit. But if they're not ready to do it, we always encourage them, come back when you are.
Do you think that you need to sacrifice quality with the lower budgets then? As you're getting up higher in the funnel, you probably think, oh yes, I've got a few dollars left or of this of the budget, for example. Have you found that people want to still deploy, but they deploy on with less quality? And if so,
look, I think good
yeah,
top of funnel comes down to three things. Reach, are you reaching the right people? And are you reaching enough of them? Frequency, are you doing so an appropriate number of times? You don't need to oversaturate them. You don't
yeah,
need to reach them 30, 40 times in a month. You also want to reach them more than once a month if you want to move the needle. And then are you presenting a compelling message? And I think those are table stakes if you want to have any chance of success. So from my vantage point, we don't like to compromise on those three. Now, they may be slightly different for different businesses. There is a company we're working with now where we're finding a reach strategy with lower frequency may actually yield better results based on the nature of their product. And so that's okay. We've learned that. And so we can go with a slightly undersaturated approach, and they're seeing good down funnel impact. It all depends. Is it a low involvement purchase? Is it a high involvement purchase? This particular one's a free app that you can download. So it's a low involvement purchase. So reach strategy sometimes can work in that instance. If you're selling a car, a reach strategy isn't going to necessarily work. You need to get the people that are in market for a car as much as you can, or approaching that window where they're starting to think about a new car.
And that's interesting because there's now intent data, right, surrounding all of that. And to your part on technology, there's the whole aspect of the traditional advertising tech, or even just the practices, right? Do you feel like people should be moving away from those old school, or do you think they should just be molding it, right, or adapting it to use the new sets of technology and buying intent data, things like that we have available to us, opposed to sticking with just traditional ad, for example?
Yeah, we have a framework we like to share, where you look at how many potential new customers does this medium reach? Yeah, put it through the same things: reach, frequency, compelling message.
Yeah.
And then look at the cost. And then you compare what's your cost per reach, not necessarily just CPM, but what's your cost per unique reach, and what are the underlying assumptions behind that? So, you could take print and you have to make an assumption about actual readership. You could take a billboard and you have to make an assumption about how many people are actually going to see and engage with the billboard. And you make some assumptions on that, and then you can have kind of an analytically derived approach to say, hey, this is my most efficient way to reach those customers, and let the data inform it. So I'll give you an example on two ends of the spectrum. There could be a company that's specifically trying to advertise to mechanical engineers.
Right.
and they could use us, and we can use some of that third-party data to target them. They may find there's actually an industry association, and for a certain fee, you can get an email to everybody in that industry association. One may be a lot more expensive, but when you compare the metrics of reach, frequency, compelling message, and your dollar per reach, you may say that email's better than traditional advertising just based on where your business is. I'm not buying or selling either way, but there's always a different case for different things. So I try not to say there's a one size fits all, but if you take kind of the approach of, again, reach, frequency, compelling message, and the cost, it can help narrow which channels might be most efficient.
And aside from like the technology side of things, how to enable you to do that, right? There's probably that whole custom aspect, right? So if you're becoming hyper targeted to a specific audience, trying to be there at the right time, be there in the right regions, local regions even, right? The whole idea of like having a custom creative solution, right? Or just having custom creative aimed at them. How important is that? Like what is that one? Like how does it look at what does that look like at Awarity? And you know, how impactful is that in comparison to the generic stuff?
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer that when you're thinking about top of the funnel, evergreen creative can work really well because we're exposed to 4,000 to 6,000 ads a day minimum, whether we realize it or not. And none of us can probably remember 10 ads we've seen on a given day at most. And if we're lucky, we'll remember one or two ads. The ones
Yeah.
we'll remember are the ones we're thinking about. Because it meets an inherent need that we have actively in our life. And so with that, I'm generally more a proponent that for most businesses, less is more, because and I'll give you a very tangible example. We work with a lot of minor league baseball teams, and there's 100 some teams across the country, and they're very promotionally focused. So they'll have Star Wars night, Disney princess night, they'll have fireworks nights, they'll have dollar beer night. And the way that a lot of them used to do things was to have a different ad for each of those nights every day of the week. Now, if you're a consumer and you're seeing these ads, you're like, are they the fireworks team? Are they the dollar beer night team? Are they the Disney team? Like, what are they? What we pivoted to is an evergreen message. And then if they've got some key strategic initiatives, like let's say they need a certain amount of ticket sales on dollar beer night, let's pick the most important promotional nights and advertise those in conjunction to your evergreen. And we're really proud that these teams have seen industry leading results with us. They've not only been able to maintain their advertising impact after switching to us in this approach, but they've grown their advertising impact as a result.
I think that the messaging part that you mentioned definitely invokes or builds trust, right, with those audiences as well, because you're seeing the message consistently, but you're seeing a variation of that, so that it's not like this becomes an other than ad fatigue, right? We don't want to go for that sort of phrasing,
Sure.
but the best way to think about it is going back to the emotion side of it, right? Looking at those messages and stuff, how does it make people feel? Does it become annoying or not? And I think having the variance in a lot of those and catering certain messages to those demographics, I think that starts to make it more refreshing instead of annoying, right? Where it's blanket, we see it on the TV sort of thing. And I think that's important. Do you think that has an inevitable impact on the way to generate leads? Let's say for a startup, right? We talk about, okay, you don't need to bombard the same person with the same message 50 times. They just need to know what your brand does, right? What your software does, for example, and what the next steps are, right? If you were interested. And not everyone's in the buyer's journey at the same time. There's definitely not 100% of the market available at the time. But the idea is that you have enough voice or share of voice in the market so that if your competitors come and try to also target them, they already are aware that, we already know this solution, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of fancy them more. They sound like great to work with. We know exactly what they do, and we know what they have to offer in the spectrum, not just the one thing. So you've probably seen that yourself, right? Across multiple clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and build on that, like, this notion of ad fatigue It generally only applies to the largest advertisers that are truly saturating the market. If you're not saturating the market, it's going to take a lot longer to get to fatigue. And so I think people are sometimes worried about it, but unless you're spending, uh, and overspending in a specific market, you're not going to get to fatigue very quickly.
Yeah, I found that people do rush into creating those messaging, the messaging, getting creatives together really quickly to just like, oh, we want to be in front of them, which is perfectly fine because you need to get something out in order to get something back, some feedback from the market to understand how they're working. I'm guessing you guys do some form of testing on your side too, of course. But one thing I found that, and I don't know how this works with you and the team, Aditya, is finding, letting things simmer after you've put something out there, getting feedback from the market, and then crafting more effective messaging on the back end of that data. And I
Yeah.
think there's an element of you have to look at the data, but you've got to also make sure you take it with a pinch of salt because it's not qualitative at the end of the day. Someone might come back to you and say, actually, this was fantastic. Three people might end up coming back to you. Oh, we saw you last year. I can't tell you the number of times we've had on projects where we said we had some campaign running, we switched it off because it looked like it wasn't working, but then we had like 12 to 16 months down the line they came back and were like, oh, last year we saw you guys at this event, or we saw this
Yep.
ad from you guys on
Yep.
LinkedIn or Facebook or something, and we saved it, we bookmarked it, but we're now ready to buy it, right?
That's
So
exactly it. That's why, and I think to answer one of your earlier questions, that's why I'm always a big proponent of ongoing brand awareness building, because there's only always a certain percentage of the market available at any given time. You're never going to be able to time the market,
yeah,
but good awareness building will do three things. It'll keep you top of mind so that when the need arises, you're in the consideration set immediately. Secondly, you can create demand. So people that maybe weren't thinking about it see it and like, oh, I could use that. But the third is you will reach some people actively looking as well. And all three are good outcomes. They're just going to have different impacts. And I think to your point on the testing, we always say don't change creative, don't change strategy until you've gone through at least 1.5 purchase cycles. So if you know your product is a 6-month purchase cycle, give it 9 months at least to see what happens. And that's not the answer everybody wants because we're in this world that's so fast paced and we can change things so quickly. But sometimes you can make changes with false negatives or false positives and things. So one of the things we're proponents of, and we're actually baking a lot of this functionality into our dashboard in upcoming releases, is let's start looking at other KPIs beyond just sales and leads. That's like the finish line of a marathon. If you just said, hey, how many times did people run through the ribbon, but you can't discount the 26 other miles and everything that goes into that journey to get there. And so other KPIs that we're starting to report on and we're baking into our dashboard is how many new people are you getting to your website every month? How many people are returning to your website every month? How is that correlating to your changes in advertising strategy, whether it's messaging or channels or budget? How is that correlating to the advertising strategy? And those are things you could sometimes get a quicker read on, because I always tell people for our business, we like to under promise and over deliver. We tell them what we can control is getting new people to your site. We can't always control what happens with them. I shouldn't say always. We can't control what happens after that. And we have evidence. Like I talked about minor league baseball. We could work with two different teams that look nearly identical, do the exact same thing for those two teams and how we're targeting and saturating the market with messaging that's very similar. One team may see 20-1 ticket sales tracked through a conversion pixel. Another team may see 2-1. We turned all the same knobs and levers. We didn't do better work for one or the other. There's a whole host of other factors across those 4 Ps that ultimately determine the down funnel impact. And so that's why I think looking at some of those other metrics beyond just sales can prove to be really valuable. And I think we're seeing our clients respond to that. I think, unfortunately, Google and Facebook created this cost per conversion metric, which I think is a terrible metric, and it's very misleading and leads to bad choices and bad decisions. But it became an easy button, but honestly, it limits growth. If that's how you focus, it's limiting growth. And that's where we have our data science team working on what are all those other metrics that ultimately correlate to long-term growth, and how do we help customers measure those? Because to your point, those are the things that you might not see an effect for 6 to 12 months. But if we could start showing them that in month one and say, down the road, you should see this impact. And if you're not, you may have some work to do on your website or the other components of your 4Ps.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I've been banging on about recently is the fact that marketing to some degree has been almost become distorted because of the way the internet's making it move. So it was actually really exciting when we found that we can use things like the Facebooks and the Googles and other ad platforms that we could even remotely target whoever we want. But what's I think with the whole conversation about metrics, we can have an entire like 50 episodes on this, right? If we wanted, but I think it's ruined the way marketers actually approach marketing now
Yes.
as well, because it's not about the generating the lead, or it's not about the how do you say it, how many customers had the direct impact from this particular ad. No one understands that there's a lot that goes on in the background, just like you said with the two baseball teams. A lot goes on in the background, the purchasing decisions in like with startups, right? With software startups, there's a whole buyers committee, and especially if you're selling to enterprise, um, you got to go through a whole league of people in order to get something signed off, right? Because it's complex, requires integration, needs sign off, you need to look at budgets, things like that. And I think it's really important that you mentioned the three key components for smaller businesses to crack the code, right? To
Yeah.
For world class marketing. We know we need to reach the right audience. We need to get the right amount of frequency going, and then the messaging is important. But I think what's interesting is that people are getting bogged down in, instead of configuring or constructing new messaging or readapting messaging that they've used already to try and appeal to the audience or try and get more feedback, they're focused on the metrics part, like you mentioned. They're focused on that metric of what's my ROAS and how much
That's
is my
it.
CPL, and that's made it tricky. And they're essentially optimizing for the wrong thing. And little do they know, where they could have put more budget into the top of funnel and optimizing it for the right audience and getting them into the journey earlier, they've just spent months spending, if not the same amount, if not more money in optimizing for the wrong thing, meaning they have to go all the way back to start again, right? So by that time, they would have burned enough money. I'm guessing you found that, right, in the industry, because
No,
the
absolutely.
approach is bad.
The analogy, one of our senior sales leaders, he came from the world of minor league baseball, and he tells a story about how before he started using Awarity, so he used us as a client, then he joined us, joined our team. The previous company was spending over 50% of the marketing budget in remarketing, and that's how they were juicing the numbers on ROAS. And the analogy he used, it's like serving an ad to somebody in the McDonald's drive-through and then taking credit when they buy the Big Mac. Like, they're already there. And I was like, it's a great analogy. But if you make a ROAS only decision, that's the long-term implication, is you start pouring money into people already in the drive-through lane, and then you have a self-fulfilling prophecy of feeling good about your marketing working. But really, the good marketing is curating that entire journey and bringing more people into the funnel and meeting them where they are. I think the number one mistake that this whole ROAS conversations led to is marketers are generally, not everybody, but I hear this a lot on folks we talk to. They're very focused on, what will this advertising do for my ROAS? What will it do for my business? Instead of asking, how does this help the customer on their journey? And at the end of the day, we're all customers. So if you flip the mindset from, I have business executive authority, I need to deliver a positive ROI. Well, the way to deliver the positive ROI is to delight more customers. And the way you delight more customers is to curate an experience from start to end. Imagine you're calling your best friend and you're trying to convince him to buy a new product. That in itself is not a layup. you have to make a compelling case, and that's a one-to-one conversation with somebody you trust. Now imagine you're trying to get somebody you don't know, and you're holding up a sign and trying to get them to buy something, and all you could do is what you could put on that sign. You got to hope they read it. That's
Yeah.
advertising. And so when you flip the script and say, how do I help the customer? How do I show them the value we're providing helps their life in some meaningful way? And how do I make people aware of it? And after they become aware, how do I continue to curate an experience that makes their life better? That's ultimately the way to get to a positive ROAS in a much larger pond.
Yeah. I actually want to put a pin in that for a second because there's an approach where there's something you mentioned earlier about us having direct impact on this ad campaign or this piece of messaging created this many customers. Marketing's job is not to do that, right? It's to influence people's behavior. So you're not actually there saying, oh yes, let's get them to buy. We're standing outside the car showroom. Your objective is to buy with this sign you've just created, right? No. It's meant to influence the behavior of, if they are in the market for a car, will they go to your branch, or will they go to the branch next door, which is probably a
Exactly.
Toyota, right? Um, Opposed to the BMW showroom or whatever it is. And I think the same goes for both B2C and B2B, right? There's a lot of the reason why we have you today as well, Aditya, is because you have so much to share on the side of what it looks like inside. Like these big businesses, they didn't have money. They didn't always have money, right? The money got built up over time after they took the approach of, let me get the word out there. How do we get the word out there? They targeted the right people with the right messaging, and slowly that budget grew, and that's why they dominate um, areas of marketing. And startups, the reason why they're so scared is because, well, we've seen what they've achieved. Obviously, they dominate the market. But they don't realize how good it is for them. They can test creative in a more agile fashion. They're
Yeah.
much more lean. They can get more out, and it takes less time for them to go through approvals and whatever it is
Yeah.
to get stuff to market. So they could be marketing much sooner and reaching a specific audience, small set of audience. And I know that we're running low on time here, but one, you mentioned the metrics part, right? Let's take that pin that we put in. Let's talk about the metrics part again, because I think I've always said to people that, and you may have said this too, right? Or you may have said this to customers when they expect a direct ROI from the campaign. Try and switch on the campaign and then see how your main business metrics go up or down, right? I.e., the number of opportunities you created in X amount of time after you've run those campaigns in the buyer cycle that you were talking about, and then switch them off and see if nothing happens. If you keep getting opportunities, fine. But if you don't get any opportunities, then you know that somehow your top of funnel activity and campaigns had an impact because you're reaching the right audience and you're already planting the seed, right? You're influencing the decision for the future when they are ready to buy. And that's why
Yeah.
even in B2B startups, we always say, forget lead count. It's the number of opportunities that are generated in the year, or the halfway through the year, compared to when we compare it last year when we were doing these different campaign initiatives, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's I don't know if that's something you've seen, but definitely I think there needs to be a mindset shift. And I'm not saying that the ad platforms are bad, but the ad platforms are to also blame because they influence the way we market,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And I think
No,
that's
they do great things. I agree with you. They do great things. Facebook and Google have created some phenomenal tools that open opportunity for small business to do things they never could do before. It's just, to your point, the unintended consequence of that is an oversimplification of metrics. To me, you should be looking at things like new website visitors. What are the trackable sources and the non-trackable? Good advertising. One of the things I'll tell you with programmatic banner ads, as an example, which, look, it's a channel a lot of people have said I've tried and I've had poor results, and that's why we rebuilt the way that it works, to make sure we're getting higher viewability, lower CPM, more reach at a lower cost without relying on third-party data. But that's a separate conversation. But what we've seen is two things. We believe 70% of ad clicks are actually accidental, and we have data to back that up. And we've seen 98% of conversions are actually on a view basis, not a click basis. And that's factual. And so when you factor that in, then it informs your KPIs of clicks, your KPIs of direct conversions are not right. Because I can see an ad on this phone. I could then buy something on my computer over there, and it may not give credit to the ad I saw on the phone. And so, and in a world where cookies are diminishing, that cross-device trackability still is not on point. What do? I think you look at KPIs like new website visitors, returning website visitors. Google Analytics has a whole trove of really valuable insight. It just takes a little bit of technical know-how to extract it. What pages are people starting at? What pages are they visiting throughout their journey? Where are they finishing? Are we answering their most common questions throughout that experience? Are we finding ways to intercept them and get them to fill out a form? Like just those basic things, you could start to look at a lot more different metrics beyond just immediate ROAS or even long-term ROAS, because it helps you identify those other friction points.
So that brings it to a final question, right? Because we're talking about small businesses, right? And getting the bang for the buck for their advertising. How do these small businesses deal with like the diminishing cookies, for example? How do they keep CPCs low? Bearing in mind that the ad platforms optimize CPCs based on how clickable your ads are or how engaging they are or things like that, right? So how do you advise that these startups keep their costs low? Just before we end.
First off, I wouldn't focus on clicks.
Yeah.
I would not focus on clicks. Like, just because you clicked on a car ad doesn't mean you're going to buy a car. We were talking to a real estate group, and they were sharing how when they feature a luxury home, how it gets so much engagement, but it's just people in town wanting to see a cool house, like, and just check it out. It doesn't mean that they're about to go buy it. And so the notion of engagement or clicks is not correlate ultimately to business impact. And so I think the way that these startups manage, I think the hard part with a small business is a couple of startup or a small business, a couple of things. One is you may not have the marketing expertise in-house, and marketing is the one discipline that generally people feel least confident in. They're just not sure what to do or not to do and how to think about it. And that's honestly why I'm working on a marketing book to help dispel that. That'll be out hopefully the second half of this year, 2024. We're in final, first round of editing. But the goal is to help small businesses with that. But the second is they're dealing with a lot of moving pieces, especially if you're an earlier stage business. You're trying to figure out product market fit. You're trying to figure out the other components of your 4 Ps beyond advertising. And so you've got all these different moving parts, and it's hard to know which ones are actually moving the needle or not. And you can't afford to do each one in isolation, because when you're a startup or an early stage business, it's survive or die. And so you can't be like, well, I'm going to try this and sit tight for 3 months and wait. So I get it. And I think that's what makes it so challenging. What I always suggest in that situation is figure out the things you can set and forget and give time. And I'd like to think awareness advertising is one of those, because we play such a key role in it. Figure out how to get a steady stream of people to your site and set it and forget that. It may not be optimal. It may not be the best. And then start honing with that. Make that kind of your test field and hone the other components of your 4 Ps to say, how do I curate that traffic more into sales? And as you start to see that succeed, then you can start to open up the funnel and invest more there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you're not getting your business and whatever product you're selling out there, whether it's software or you're a large enterprise sort of service, for example, you're not going to be getting in front of anyone if you're not showing anything, right? So right. I think it's really important. I think honestly, it's been great. We've got some key components on what people can focus on, but small businesses and startups definitely have an impact and level the playing field now, right? We've sort of uncovered that, and if so long everyone continues to refine their messaging, that's important, and they continue to optimize their customer journey and make sure that they're focused on those 2 key areas, right? And then layering on that frequency and reach part so you can meet those 3 components that Aditya talked about. I think you'll be on your way. But Aditya, honestly, this has been amazing. Thank you for coming on. It's been amazing and insightful, especially. And I think definitely people can take a lot of stuff away from this, and they can go and start to configure some things towards the top of their funnel, right, to see who they're reaching. Um,
Yeah.
if people wanted to, excuse me, if people wanted to connect with you, or even buy the book with you in the future, I'm guessing you got some info, right? So in the future, that will probably be released. So where can people connect with you if they want to
Yeah,
speak with
the
you?
best way, if you want to learn more, is visit awarity.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post blogs and different content on LinkedIn, Aditya Varanasi. And then I think beyond that, if you visit our site and request a demo, request a meeting, we'll do some discovery. We'll learn about your business. We'll learn about what your goals are, and then we'll come back and tell you what we can and can't do. And the goal is to provide people with direct, honest perspective. And sometimes that leads to people saying, hey, this isn't the right thing for me now. And sometimes people come in and say, no, this is exactly what we need. Let's proceed. And our goal is really a long-term relationship. And the way our pricing is set up, we really only benefit when people stick with us for the long term. So we have that aligned incentive structure that we've got to continue to demonstrate value every single month, or the client's not going to stick with us.
Yeah, I think that's it's good, and I think for everyone that wants to reach out to Aditya, I'll link those what he's mentioned in the description as well, so you guys can find that. But otherwise, if everyone did enjoy this episode, please do like or rate and review as well, and share for those businesses that also want to understand exactly how they can make an impact on the market, especially if they're competing against the large enterprises and how they can do so cost effective. So thank you once again, Aditya.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a real pleasure.
Appreciate you coming on, Aditya. Thank you.